everybody. Welcome. Welcome, New York Comic-Con. This is super exciting. Wow. Welcome to Jim Henson, the early years. My name is Joe Hennis. I'm the co-owner and editor-in-chief of ToughPigs.com. It's a Muppet fan site. Someone reads the site. Did you hear that? Someone was really excited about me. Wow.
I think that's your wife.
Yeah. ToughPigs, in case you don't know, it's a website for adult-aged fans of the Muppets, Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, anything Jim Henson. Thanks, yeah. And speaking of Jim Henson, we're here to celebrate him and the early days of his career. Do you guys know who Jim Henson is? Okay, great. Does anyone not know who Jim Henson is? Yeah, I see literally two hands, so I'm going to explain to you. So Jim Henson was the creator of the Muppets, and I mean, we could really spend a whole hour here just talking about. He's a legend.
It's all in the book.
Buy the book.
There's a whole book about it. We'll talk about the book.
Is that available here? Or where can people purchase
I have two
the book?
copies.
We'll get to the book, but first let's talk about Jim.
Right.
He was the creator of the Muppets. He did a million things. He was the performer behind Kermit the Frog and Ernie and Rolf the Dog. And I tried to count on Muppet Wiki how many characters he actually created or performed. It was somewhere around the vicinity of 450 characters, which is impressive. But today we're going to be going way back to the beginning. We're going to be seeing what came before the Muppets, before Sesame Street, before all that stuff. But before we get to the before stuff, let's meet some of our panelists. First, clap for these people you haven't met yet. Our first panelist is a writer who's been with the Jim Henson Company since 1987. He is the president of the Jim Henson Legacy and the author of the Muppets Character Encyclopedia. That's not that book. That's a different book. He continues to write for the Muppets and other various Henson projects, including the brand new book, Sam and Friends, the story of Jim Henson's first television show.
Hardcover and softcover.
Two different covers. You should buy them both. It is now available for purchase and enjoyment. Please give a hand to Craig Shemin.
Thank you.
Next up, one of the most talented puppeteers I've ever witnessed. Yeah, make that face. You know it's true. He's been a featured performer on Sesame Street since 2005, having performed characters like a honker, a guitar-playing chicken. One time you played an orange. Do you remember that?
Nope.
But you probably know him best as the performer of Elmo for the past decade. It's Ryan Dillon, everyone.
Not crazy.
Our next panelist played an important role in bringing this Sam and Friends book to life, and an even more important role within the Jim Henson Company as a whole. She's an unsung hero of research and cutting through red tape, the associate archivist and collections manager of the Henson Company. It's Susie Tofte. Last but not least, one of my oldest friends in Muppet fandom. He is an illustrator and graphic designer who's created some of the most stunning, unofficial Muppet and Henson artwork that I've ever seen. And we are now removing the "un" in unofficial because he has stepped in as the graphic designer for this Sam and Friends book and the artist behind the stuff that you guys just got for free as you walked in the room. We're excited to welcome Dave Hulteen to the panel. Hello, Dave. Before we really get started, and then, hey, have you met Sam? That's Sam from Sam and Friends. Is Emily Engel here? No? Well, if she was here, we would have pointed out that she's this incredible artist who makes these plush replicas of Muppets. And as you'll see soon, and as you'll see in this photo here, Sam is made out of like hard plastic. And this is a much softer version. So thank you, Sam, for being here. We have got plenty of questions for you. I love that you're clapping for a doll. That's kind of adorable. So, Craig, we're about to show a brief video showcasing what Jim created on Sam and Friends. But first, could you tell us, what is Sam and Friends?
Well, let me check.
Yeah. 43.
Sam and Friends was a 5-minute, roughly, daily show with puppets that Jim and Jane Henson performed between 1955 and 1961 on WRC-TV, Washington, D.C., local television. And it began as lip sync performances to music, and then as Jim got more comfortable speaking for his characters, they started doing comedy sketches and introductions to the songs. And it was very popular because the air schedule bounced all over the schedule, but their main time slots were either right before the network news at 6:35 or 6:40, or right before the Tonight Show. So it had a very adult, sophisticated audience for these sort of silly, gently subversive performances. So I think that's basically what it is.
That's what it is. But I think
it was what introduced Kermit to the world.
Right, you've heard of him, right? There he is. No collar, not quite a frog yet, but one of the biggest stars in the world is right there. So in addition to Sam and Friends, we're going to be talking a little bit about, like the panel is called, it's the early years. He did many things in those early years. So I'd love to ask the panel very quickly down the line, do you have a favorite Sam and Friends or early Jim Henson moment, maybe something from his commercials? One of your favorites. Craig, you want to start?
Well, I mean, it's hard to pick out just one, but I had a very unique experience because I got to listen to a lot of stuff that doesn't exist, and I got to read all of the scripts. So I think that one of the coolest things is a piece where they used real audio. Huntley Brinkley Report was the news show that came on right after that. So basically, they re-edited Huntley and Brinkley's Good Evening things. This is David Brinkley at NBC News, Washington, Chet Huntley, NBC News, New York, and re-edited into responses to Kermit. And it was sort of really creative for its time, and Saturday Night Live ended up doing a lot of that fun with real audio later on. But it was, I thought it was one of the most clever early pieces, and when they actually did it, Chet Huntley is broadcasting out of New York, so he didn't see it, but David Brinkley in Washington saw it and was laughing when he started the news that night, and no one outside of Washington knew why he was laughing.
You took all of our answers.
Oh,
I think
That's it, definitively. It's
Yeah,
the
we
best
can go
one.
home.
Yeah.
Consult this.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a specific moment from it, but what I love about this era is that he's figuring out what the Muppet style is, what the design is. And when you go into the 60s, you start to see what he locks in as his character design style, which is a big fat guy and a small, little, tiny, short, skinny guy. And you see that all over the commercials. I think the Wilkins commercials, which people might be a little bit more familiar with. Does anybody know the Wilkins coffee commercials?
If you're not, maybe we'll be watching a few of them today.
I
We'll
think
see if you're lucky.
if they weren't in black and white, they could have been made for TikTok. I just think they're absolutely
And
brilliant.
some were in color.
And some were in color, but it really...
That you may be seeing.
Well, maybe you'll see them. But I think I love watching these to figure out this young kid. It's this young kid figuring out what his style is, and that is exciting to watch it develop.
Okay, so since Hunter Brinkley was also my answer, I will say that one of the things that I love about this era and what you should look out for as we see more clips is that not only did Jim and Jane build these puppets, but they also did the scenery. Everything that you see on camera is pretty much in Jim's hand. And so I love the scenery. It's hand-painted, it's hand-drawn, and again, it's sort of like, it's another part of Jim that you don't necessarily see later on, but you see him as an artist, and I wish we had some of the set pieces left. But we don't. So yeah, that's my answer.
Just things getting eaten and blown up. I mean, it's
Which was pretty much the ending of
Yeah.
the early years.
That's how this panel's going to end, by the way. One or the other.
Who will
Get
it
ready.
be?
I skipped lunch.
Craig, you wrote a whole book about Sam and Friends. Why?
Why not? No, it's interesting. I wanted to do it for a while because I knew Jane Henson very well. I worked closely with her on the Jim Henson legacy. And one of the interesting things about Jane's story is that she was there working with Jim for the very beginning, but she always deflected any credit or attention back to him. And I think she thought it was a clean story to be that this is Jim Henson, the creator of the Muppets. And even later on, when people wanted to honor her, she would always say, well, have them honor Jim, and I'll accept it for him. And I started doing some interviews with her a few years before she passed away, and I got her to admit how involved she was. You know, we knew she did the show with Jim, but then she started to admit, yeah, I guess I did build some of the puppets. And yeah, when Jim went to Europe, I took over the show with Bob Payne, and we kept it going. And I said, well, did Jim leave any instructions or material for you to use? No, we just did it. And these are very important things. And part of why I wanted to write this book is to tell not only Jim's story, but Jane's story as well. And one of the things that I know in the dedication, the book is dedicated to my wife and to Jane, and I'd say in the dedication, she's going to get the credit she deserves, and there's nothing she can do about it. And because I know if I had written this while she was alive, she would insist that I not put so much of what she was doing in there, because she just didn't want to take that credit. And so I explore that in the book, and also I thought it was a very inspiring story to young artists of today, because here's a guy who Sam and Friends started right after he got out of high school. He was a freshman in college, and it wasn't very easy to do this stuff. You didn't have the ability to reach a mass audience with YouTube. You had to get a spot on television. You had to, go to the studio. You had to, wait until there were cameras available. They couldn't rehearse the show on camera until just before airtime. So I thought that if people saw what Jim was able to accomplish with very limited amount of resources, I thought I could inspire young artists today to get out and do something. So do something.
They are doing something. They're at Comic-Con.
Yes, and they all came here. Thank you so much.
Ryan, as a performer, what kind of inspiration do you find in watching some of these old sketches? Because Jim was still kind of learning his craft.
Yeah.
I mean, teaching himself his craft.
Yeah.
And so what kind of stuff do you pick up from that for your own performances?
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch because you are seeing him. He developed a style that no one had ever even attempted because it hadn't even been considered. This is so early on in television that there were some influences he had. There was a puppeteer named Bill Baird who was on the CBS morning show. Yeah. Then he had a spot every day, I think maybe. But he had a style that was very similar to the Sam puppet, the sort of plastic wood hard head. And what Jim is learning is two things. One, a flexible puppet is much more. It tells a better story for television. The tight shot takes a really flexible puppet really well. And he's also learning that he can use the television as the frame. Normally if they would shoot a puppet show for television, it would be a proscenium, like a little ledge, and they would perform behind the ledge. And he's learning, well, that could be a ledge. We could do a car. We could have or we could not have one, or we can have, somebody behind a frame. So he's learning all these different things. And his puppetry style, this idea that the mouth moves with every syllable and it's precise lip sync had never been considered before, and he's really refining it at this time, which is cool to see.
Susie, you were very much an unsung hero of this book because you were so.
That photo.
Yeah, I did.
Can you tell us what it was like to scan that photo?
Well,
That's a joke question.
Yeah.
But if you have a real answer, please feel free.
so, one of the things I love about being an archivist is that you get to dig and dig and dig. And we're still looking for things, and Craig is always asking for things. I really appreciate Craig's curiosity. But when I came to the Jim Henson Company, we had photo albums that Jim had put together. So we have one from his WRC days. We have lots of family vacations, that sort of thing. And then, and they're great photographs. But then I opened a box one day, and it was filled with rolls of negatives that had come from Jane Henson's house. And they were written on the sleeves in Jim's hand, dates and maybe one or two words. And so I was like, oh my goodness. So we got, instead of one picture from the photo album, we got 36.
And in the photo album, sometimes he would cut up the pictures.
Oh yeah, and he would cut up the pictures.
Make a montage.
Yeah, and also the photos had faded over the years. And so these color photographs from Sam and Friends were amazing to get to scan and to see. It brought another like level of detail to the story. And the other really great thing about reading these photographs as rolls of film as opposed to individual pieces of film is that Jim took all of these photographs, and so he was documenting what he was seeing. And so when he's at WRC doing afternoon, I mean, he's just excited to be at a television studio, and he's trying to learn everything. So he has pictures of the cameramen, pictures of the musicians, and Jane is there too, and that's another like great way that we see how Jane was involved in this whole project from the beginning. But you also see him as a student at the University of Maryland, and so it's like all together. So he's in class, he's working in the theater department, he's bowling with his friends, and then he's on Sam and Friends. And so it's like it tells a really, really great story about his life at that time. But the color Sam and Friends is just like
I should mention that the pictures are in black and white in the book, but the ebook has, I believe, most of the pictures in color. And I'm going to have a page on the website, a color photo gallery on the website. If you buy the book, you can email and get a code and be able to see pictures in color.
Bonus. Yeah. See, everyone should buy the book specifically so that you can get the code for the photos, obviously. Speaking of artwork for this, Dave, you created the art for the cover and this ancillary material. How did you get brought in on this project? And do you want to walk us through what you created and how you did it?
Well, I wasn't actually hired to do the cover. I was just hired to do the promotional work. And then all of a sudden...
And then I got desperate. I needed someone.
And then it was this and that and the other thing. So the best way I can, for the purpose of the story, we're going to say that Craig said this. He might not have said this, but for the purpose of the story, Craig said this. A long time ago, I was at a panel, probably for the 40th anniversary of Sesame, and you weren't there, so maybe it wasn't you. You weren't on that panel, but it was somewhere. And somebody asked a really great question. They said, "How can I be the next Jim Henson?" And Craig said, he goes, "The best way to be the next Jim Henson is to not be anything like Jim Henson. Be yourself. Go out and do your thing." And I was like, "That's brilliant." And then he contacted me and he said, "I need you to draw like Jim Henson." So there.
Yeah, I sort of gave Dave very challenging task because there's a complicated legal situation with Sam and Friends, which just means that I was not allowed to have new artwork of the characters made. And basically, the Henson people said, you can do your promotional materials, but you have to use actual photographs of the characters, and you can then supplement that with art in Jim's style. And Dave did an amazing job of doing this. I can talk about how you came to do the cover.
Go for it.
But I know this is your question, but
We got slides for that too.
Legally, it's probably better for you to talk about it.
First of all, I do want to show off, this is just a sampling of some of Dave's artwork. Dave is so talented. He works in a dozen different mediums, and everything he does is so, he knows how to capture that character, the character of a Muppet, which I think is harder than it sounds. So this is just a sampling that people like Craig would have looked at and said, "Oh, this is the kind of graphic designer that we want to hire for the promotional stuff for this book."
It's a good selection.
The cover started because, again, the legal situation of Sam and Friends is that I had to get Disney to approve me using Kermit in this book. The Henson Company owns Sam and Friends, but it's a frozen property. Neither Disney or Henson can use it without the other's permission. So Henson said, "Yeah, we would love for you to do this book, but you have to get Disney to say it's okay." So then I go to Disney, and they say, "Well, we need to see what it's going to look like. So you send us the pictures that you're going to use, and then what's your cover going to look like if you want Kermit to be on this cover?" And Disney was very nice because this is something they usually, it's very rare they let non-Disney publications use Disney-owned characters. So this was the photo, these are the photos that I started out with, when I was thinking about doing the cover. There's a TV set that Jim drew for a community coffee background, the Salmon Friends logo, and that picture of Jim, which I think is one of 2 color pictures of Jim with the Muppet group. And then we put them together, and I just did this very quickly, and I'm not a Photoshop, or I used a different program that you don't have to pay to use, so that's how not Photoshop I am. And this was what I was able to send to Disney and Henson and get them to approve for the cover. And then I knew this was not a good enough quality to use, and that's why I reached out to Dave and said, can you make this good? And Dave redrew Jim's Salmon Friends logo. He redrew the TV set and put it in wood grain, and he replicated the little speaker grill. And he just did a really good job of taking my rudimentary art and turning it into something that could actually be printed.
I shouldn't tell you this, but I had a couple people reach out to me on Twitter saying, I'm sorry I trashed the cover. I didn't know you were doing it. That's not true. But I had to, the photo of Jim's TV was pretty small. And if you know print resolution versus web resolution, it would have had to have been blown up 10 times bigger. So I said, can I just repaint it? And Craig said, no. So I said, well, why don't you just let me try? And he said, okay, but it's still going to be no. And then I redid it, and he's like, well, now that we've repainted it, can we move some stuff around?
Yeah, yeah. Because the thing is, I had gone. The reason I kept saying no, don't change it, is that it had gone through the years-long process, or at least getting the cover approved was months long, and I was just, I told him it's not going to change. We're just going to make it look better. So
and it's Jim's,
yes,
too.
Yes, it's Jim's. So we were able to do that. And then, and then people who had approved the cover started forgetting that they approved the cover. And I started getting emails, who approved this? Well, you did. It was a year and a half ago, but you did it. I didn't know it expires. But so, yeah. Thanks, Dave.
Absolutely.
Well done, Dave. Ryan, we talked a bit about, Jim developing the puppetry styles back then. But there was a lot of things that, like we talked about, he was inventing for the first time. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of those innovations that are still in use today?
Yeah. I just want to say 2 things. First of all, we just clapped for commercials, which I think is really cool. That says a lot about what this content is. And I just want to say my reactions to watching it are so... What I love about it is it doesn't hide the fact that they're puppets. I think, as the Muppets have developed and as Sesame and all the style has developed, we've really taken care to make sure every single moment is very realistic, that everything... But I love that these are puppets, and we're not, nobody's fooled by it. They can be thrown out of things. They can be... You lit that puppet on fire. That's real fire. I mean, and that's Frank doing that puppet. He tells that story somewhere that it was a close call that day. That he really, I wouldn't do. Are you kidding me?
We're talking about Frank Oz, by the way.
Frank Oz, who is Frank Oz. If you don't know who he is, sorry.
If that fire was a little bit closer to his hand, we might not have had Yoda.
You'd never have Yoda. But at any rate, so to talk about, how this style is still being used. The mechanics are the same. I have, courtesy of the Jim Henson Company, we have some puppets that we use to train new performers. So this is I picked something that looked kind of the era, kind of Wilkinsy. Hi, I'm not a real character, so I don't know what I said. We're going to find out today who I am.
Yeah, we're going to name him before the end of this panel.
Yeah. But so this is the most basic kind of Muppet style or Henson style puppet you can find, and it's really a technology. There is all of these design choices are deliberate, and they're meant for a television camera or a film or for phones now. There is a deliberate placement of the pupils to make sure that, if they were wall-eyed, it wouldn't look like it was looking in any one direction. If I look at, hi Craig, if I look at you this way, it's not as compelling as if I look at him this way. You see 2 eyes. So there's, oh sorry, is this my specific? Is this my? I don't know why it doesn't work. but and then the mouth. Jim was the first one to do lip sync. with a puppet. People had done it before. That Stan Freberg, who worked with Bob Clampett on Beanie and Cecil, was a big influence of Jim's. And you can see a lot of Kermit in Cecil. It's a very early TV show. But they were doing this, but they weren't doing it with the precision that Jim and Jane developed. Jim has very different style than Jane. You know, Jim kind of goes like that when he does his puppets. He does figure eights, especially in the early days. He gets real big and you know, he does all that stuff. And Jane really developed that dropping the thumb, because you know, when you're puppeteering, you don't want to puppeteer like this, and that's the instinct. And your hand's instinct is to do this. So it's reverse of everything. He's also developing a system that was used maybe, I think, by Jerry Lewis, the monitor system, but never for puppetry. It's not, the puppeteers are not looking up, and we still don't look up. We're looking down at a monitor on the floor for many reasons. One, we get to compose our own shots, so we can make sure the puppet's not crooked or looking the wrong way, and also to keep our head out. What's challenging about it is, as people, we're all used to looking in mirrors. So when you part your hair one way and then you see a picture of yourself, you go, wait a minute, I thought my hair was parted that way. You know, it's the opposite of your expectation. Right. I guess it could apply to many other things too. But it's the opposite of what your brain expects to see. So I'm turning this way, but it's the other way down here. And there's a lot of mechanics that he developed in these first few years that are basically the same. We've gotten a little bit more developed in the puppetry. You know, often with these, they don't even have rods. They're just kind of here. But now we'll have one performer do one hand and an assistant maybe do the other if it's a complicated choreography. But the technique is almost practically the same, and the materials. I mean, this was a time when foam rubber was brand new. He talks about that in the book. That's what's used to keep these puppets structured but also pliable, so he can, you know, you can kind of get expressions out of them. That was a brand new concept that we're still utilizing today.
And what would happen if you lit it on fire?
Let's find out.
I would burn, Joe.
Oh, okay, got it.
I would burn, and there'd be no more me.
This is a very educational panel. Great.
I mean, one of the things that I talk about, Jane really talked about this, and it's a quote in the book, that before Jim, many of the puppeteers who were working in television had developed their puppets for puppet theater. So they weren't worrying about the up-close manipulation.
Yeah. You were seeing them from the back row.
So that's why Bert Hillstrom had hard, faced characters, because he didn't develop his characters for television. And, Jane sort of thinks that Kermit may have possibly been one of the first characters, if not the first character that was developed expressly for manipulation on television.
Yeah.
Susie,
I should probably go away now.
yeah.
I don't want to take.
Wait, can we name him really quick? Can someone shout out a name?
Who's going to name me? 3, 2, 1. Oswald, I heard first. Okay,
Love
bye,
it.
everybody.
Oh, great.
Bye,
Disney's
Oswald.
going to have a problem with that, too.
Okay, bye. Oswald loves you.
Susie, the Henson Company archives seem to be really thorough, at least from a fan's point of view. You always seem to have new stuff, and you're still discovering new stuff. Yeah. What are your holy grails that you don't have, that you're looking for? That God, if you opened a box and it was there,
Someone
you would
might
just
have them tonight.
Yeah,
maybe
well,
someone in this audience.
it's obviously Sam and Friends episode on video. We don't have them, but we have all the other stuff that circles it, and that's how Craig. I mean, there were some kinescopes of full
About
episodes,
15.
but Craig wrote this book because we had scripts, we had audio, we have the songs that he used, and then also when he was doing the voices, we have that audio. We have some artwork. We have some storyboards we have a lot of the storyboards of Wilkins and Wilkins. I just wanted to say, like, real quickly, when watching these sort of controlled or not so controlled chaos that you see on screen and everything sort of ending and being blown up, the reason why we have all of this documentation is because Jim saved it first. And so it was both that I think he thought he was doing something unique and that he was talented, but also he was a businessman, and he was he kept all of his receipts, which we still have. Any cab ride he took, any movie ticket that he, went to, so he was so detail oriented in that respect. And it's just like a very different person that you see in that record keeping than you see when he performs. So
it was almost like a little switch that got turned on, though. It was in November of '58 when he finally decided that this was going to be something he was going to do as a business.
Yes.
On the same day they officially incorporated the company, that's when he started recording the shows every day.
Oh, yeah, and he also, when he copyrighted the characters, he was very adamant about keeping control and ownership of his characters.
When I keep receipts, my wife calls me a hoarder, so I don't see the difference between me and Jim Henson. Dave, now you're kind of living a portion of this dream that I think a lot of us in this room have of going from being a fan of something into officially working on real product. How does that feel for you?
This is amazing. It's Jim Henson has been my creative God. I would have converted if he had a religion ever since I was a child. So this has always been a big dream and I was starting to feel stymied by drawing Muppets all the time because you post something and it's like, I worked 30 hours on this and it's this beautiful thing. No, here's Kermit, 100,000 likes. So this is very cool.
Very cool, yeah. Real quick down the line, we've got this great picture of Jim and Jane and some of the cast of Sam and Friends here. I'm always fascinated that they created such a colorful cast of characters, and only one of them had life beyond Sam and Friends. So of these characters, who would you have liked to have seen more of post Sam and Friends, maybe even into today?
I think Yorick. I think that we saw him, I think, in one Sesame Street segment. It was pointed out to me while I was doing the final pass of the book, and I had to rewrite a paragraph to say that, yes, we saw him after that. But I think that he was sort of this fun character who had a real motivation to just devour everything, and I would have liked to see him pop up from time to time.
And you can see him at the Museum of the Moving Image. He's there right now.
Yeah,
in Queens.
And there's also will be a Yorick. There were multiple Yoricks because they actually made a duplicate for some bits. So he's also at the Smithsonian and will be on display along with other characters rotating.
Yeah, we actually have a photo of the characters in the Smithsonian right there.
Yeah.
That's what they look like today.
Yeah, in December, there's going to be a new pop culture wing that they're opening, and the Sam and Friends characters will be rotated in that. But if you go to see the Puppet Up show, they redo some of the early Henson things, but for those legal reasons I talked about earlier, they have a Yorick-like character, but they don't have Yorick.
Can we go back to that picture? Oh, yeah. Okay, I've been looking at this picture since 1993. I'm obsessed with it. This picture was in a book called The Works. That was a Jim Henson book that when I was a kid, I actually read the cover off of it. And I used to walk around with this book with no cover, just exposed spine.
This was the influential book for people
this was the thing
Muppet fans in
and
the
this
90s.
Picture was in it. And a couple of things I love about it. Kermit's hand is backwards, which I love. His thumb's on the wrong side. But I love, there's some weird, great design choices. The girl at the top with the bat wing things, I love. The abstract, because at this point, too, the things he's seeing with character design are the animation of the time is very stylized and mid-century modern kind of looking. And that is really, there's an influence there for sure. The design I like the most, other than Yorick, is, do you have a picture of Chicken Liver? Because first of all, I love the name. But it's a great, there he is. I love that puppet. I think it's a brilliant design. And Jim's design aesthetic they're all the same, but one's got a stretched up head and one's got a squashed down head.
And I think Jane actually built that
and
puppet.
Jane, yeah. And
Jim designed it.
I just love the design of that puppet. But they all have such unique features that didn't always translate into things like the Muppet Show. But it's just really fun to see them figure it all out.
So I'm going to go with another Jane-built puppet, Mushmelon, the little orange guy on the bottom. And I love it that from Craig's book, I learned that there was an episode called Mushmelon and Friends when he takes over, and the episode's all about him. I don't know if it's him or her or they, them, but I've never actually seen Mushmelon performed. I don't think there's any episodes that exist of. There's the piece with Jim and Jane in there, but I don't know. He just is. That's the one I feel connected to.
Dave?
I like that this is almost like a roadmap. Like you see really simple designs that would eventually become like Bert and Ernie, but also a lot more terrifying things that you'd see in like Dark Crystal eventually and stuff. But I always thought Harry the Hipster was so cool. I'd like to see more of him.
Yeah, I agree. That would have been my choice as well. I love Harry.
The other character, Moldy Hay. I mean, the names are also really like just out there.
And it's Ernie too. If you look, Moldy Hay is right opposite of Jane there, between Kermit and the red guy, and that's really what became Ernie. That big wide mouth and the ears and the jolly.
The other thing that Craig talked about at a panel a couple of weeks ago was how. What do you want to say about what the whole premise of the show was?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Why is Sam the sole human here?
This is what Jane's explanation was, that all of the other characters were in Sam's mind. Now, I don't know if I would get that from watching or listening to these episodes, but she said that that's the reason that Sam was the only sort of humanoid character, and the others were and he didn't speak, and the others were all sort of abstractions that were the voices in his mind. And you know, I guess I could understand the theory, but it doesn't come across when you see the show. Really.
I will say, as a maker, sometimes you justify things for yourself. Yeah. You go, oh, well, maybe they're in his head. That's it. They're in his head. Got it.
Does that mean that Sam and Friends is a prequel to The Cube? Sorry, that's a very deep cut for Muppet fans. No. Sure. Great.
Okay.
Sure. All right, it's canon.
First of all, I love that, but just one thing, for fans of Pulp Fiction, this is something I always think about when I see that. When Kermit does the square, I don't know if you remember, that's in Pulp Fiction. And it really shows Jim's reach to all of these makers and directors, and in whether subliminal ways or not, I mean, just how revolutionary that kind of thing was.
Well, we know that Quentin Tarantino was a fan of his work.
Yeah.
He appeared in Muppets Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Yeah? Deep cut. Fans of that movie? Nope, not here.
My children.
Was that?
They loved it. My kids loved it.
Do they? Great. Yeah. They're the only ones, I think. Them and Quentin Tarantino. How did Jim do that? This was, what, like 1950 whatever? Like, before this, he was just lip-syncing.
It's still hard to do that.
Yeah, like, that's incredible.
He did animation. He animated the effects frame by frame on his 16 millimeter animation stand. He painted frame, he would paint it and take a picture and then paint more. And the audio was recorded first, and then he did his very rudimentary exposure sheets. Do you still have the exposure sheets for that? And so when they would do that piece, and they did it on some various shows as well as Sam and Friends, the audio, as all of the Sam and Friends performances were pre-recorded, the audio was pre-recorded. So they would run the film that had the soundtrack on it, and Jim and Jane would just sort of lip sync to that piece. And that's why you could see that Jim always preferred doing Kermit. So the lip sync is closer to being accurate on Kermit, and Jane was doing Harry.
Fascinating.
And it speaks too to Jim's. Yes, Jim was interested in puppetry because he had this job in puppetry, but he was interested in television and what the crew could help him do. I mean, that is a testament to a crew of people all hitting the bullseye. Whoever was switching or whoever had to cue that film had to be right in sync with the audio. Jim and Jane had to be right in sync. The camera had to be locked. It's a great example of teamwork in a studio.
We have some time for some Q&A. So, you want to tell us your name and where you're from? And
my name is Sue. I'm from Brooklyn.
Yay, Sue, Brooklyn!
He's been gone for a couple of years, decades almost. Why do you think his reach is still as popular today as it was? Like, I was born before Sesame Street. I am the original Sesame Street generation. When you said you were a hunker, Thought I was gonna hurt myself.
Yeah,
Please don't.
Elmo who?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
give me those
Elmo-
honkers.
no,
Yeah.
I'm a honker. Why do you think his reach is still today? With all the things that kids can watch and see and do. Why do you think his stuff is still so endearing?
I think it's the characters. Personally, I think the style and the form is very unique, and everybody who has come after him has adopted this style and made it unique for their own sensibilities. But I personally think it's the characters, and he really developed a language and a style that nobody had done before. And I mean, Kermit, I think you'd love Kermit in any medium because he's such a strong, everything he thinks and feels, and it's a testament to how great of a performer he was. But that's one piece of it. I don't know.
No, I just add simplicity.
Yeah, and simple. Simple.
Simple is good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Hello, yes.
Staying far from the microphone. So this is, I guess, a deep cut question, and not as deep as the 70s, but in the late 80s, there was the Muppet Family. This is really for you. There was the Muppet Family Christmas.
A perfect special.
The
Yeah.
best.
I'm
The best.
the only human being in the world that knows this movie, so that was really nice.
You are not alone.
I have,
Yes.
okay, so I have a couple of bootlegs from China, and I buy them in bulk whenever I buy them, and I hand them out like candy. So is there any chance of those kinds of older things that we can't get our hands on coming ever out?
That's a great question for an
Disney
archivist.
doesn't- It's
Yeah.
like one of the things that Disney doesn't own, right?
No, Disney owns
he owns it.
Muppet Family Christmas, but write to Disney, seriously.
Yeah.
Email Disney Plus, tell them
Yep.
you want to see it, because they just unsealed Bear in the Big Blue House.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
sort of,
And the
people
Muppet
didn't
Show,
want to
which-
do it.
Yeah, the Muppet
And
Show
Muppet
coming to
Show
Disney
came
Plus,
out,
yeah.
so they own all this stuff, and I think what happens is if enough people make a big fuss, they'll
Yep.
listen. Like,
It's-
we had a lot of, I just worked on a panel at D23 about Muppet Christmas Carol, and they finally said, okay, we'll let people see the full version. So,
Yeah.
The full version of Muppet Christmas Carol, including When Love Is Gone, that was previously
that'll
deleted, is
be
coming to Disney
coming
Plus.
to Disney Plus in December. So, yeah, Disney does own a lot of that materials. There are some things that are tied up with other owners.
What's tough is because the Sesame Street characters are in it.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of teamwork from a couple different organizations.
And
to
the
all-
Fraggle Rock characters.
And the
It's three
Fraggle
separate
characters. So it's
companies.
Henson, Sesame, and
Yeah.
Disney.
It's not insurmountable if enough people want to try and make it.
Seriously,
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean,
so everyone, there's a page somewhere on the Disney Plus website where you can make suggestions. So if everyone in this room goes to that page and writes in, please add Muppet Family Christmas, I think that would go a long way. Can everyone promise to do that?
Yes, let's do it.
Great. Wonderful. Hello.
Hello. I have a question for you. Since Jane seemed to be such a huge presence on these shows and didn't get so much credit, is that really indicative of the time and roles of women, how they stood behind their husbands and the men, and she really didn't get the credit because of that? Or did she really deflect to Jim because she really felt he was the creative genius of the two?
I think there may be a little of that, but she always described her role on Sam and Friends as helping. She would always say, oh, I just helped him for you to, and I tried to get her to talk about, what her contribution was. She really made it clear that it was always Jim's vision, and she was there to help make that happen. But I think that is sort of not a full description of her role. But I think there are a couple of things at play. Also, she did not consider herself as doing this for, she was a few years ahead of Jim. She was graduating. She was going to be a teacher, an art teacher. She was going to do her student teaching. She had a job offer to go and be a teacher. And Jim kind of said, well, keep doing it over the summer. Keep doing it. So I don't think she saw herself at the beginning as really a puppeteer. She saw herself as an artist who was doing this with Jim because it was fun. So I think there may be a little bit of what you're talking about, but it really, I think she really saw this as Jim's show and she helped.
It's interesting because she's a fantastic puppeteer,
Yeah.
and she trained Frank. A lot of Frank's training, Frank Oz's training, came from Jane.
And
because
for years
she's a
after that,
fantastic puppeteer.
when
Yeah,
when,
Steve and
Jane would run puppetry workshops, and I went to some of them when I was starting out, and she had a great eye for talent.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Hello, who's this?
This is my master intern. Doesn't make much money. I don't actually pay him.
He's unpaid, I assume.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you guys already mentioned how Jim and the whole organization, their works were like cutesy to weird and dark crystal. We all know it. So one of my main questions, whenever I see him, that purple dude. Every time I see him, it's just like the design is creepy. I think one of the very first videos I saw is one where like it's wearing a mask, then it eats the mask and then starts eating like Kermit the Frog. Is there like a story behind like the design of that? Or was it just one of the many weird things he did?
I don't think there's a specific story about the design, but it was a character that just devoured everything, and it was, the name comes from Shakespeare. Yorick is a skull.
Well, that was his name, Yorick.
Yeah,
That's Yorick, yes.
So they sort of designed a skull-shaped guy who could eat everything. I don't think there's a specific thing, but I think a lot of the stuff doesn't really have unique design stories behind them. They just
From a materials perspective, it's interesting because you're seeing his transition between the hard and the soft, because it's a hard-shelled puppet. It's made out of plastic wood, but it does have a bit of a jaw movement. Yeah. So he's starting to learn how to make his puppets
sometimes
flexible.
Sometimes we'd have a disembodied hand,
right?
Things.
Live hands and stuff.
Well, and for the character itself, eventually we'd see another one of Jim Henson's characters who devours everything. That became very popular. So you can kind of see the roots of Cookie Monster in a character like Yorick. Yeah. Well, I won't say Grover devours everything.
You haven't seen Grover have lunch.
That's true. Grover at Crafty, yes.
Yeah, I do get that because we've all seen there's a lot of puppets we see that the concepts carry over and they change and evolve. It's something cool to look at. Yeah. It's very cool to look at. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody clap for the monster intern. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, my name's Logan. I just had a random question. Just with the overall success of puppetry in the Jim Henson world, what was the decision when it came to actually making an animated series like the Muppet Babies that they did? And who was the one that was like, hey, maybe we try this world for a size, knowing that, between everything that's been done puppetry-wise?
Well, at that point, the final decision about doing that was Jim's, because he owned everything at that point in time. They had created the baby versions of the characters from Muppet Take Manhattan, and they decided it was a way. The Muppet Show had just ended. So the characters were not appearing on television anymore. Muppet Show ended in '81, wasn't it just? So Muppets Take Manhattan was '84. So they figured that this was a way to keep some version of the characters on television, and to sort of appeal to a younger. And it was very successful. It ran for I think 7 or 8 years on CBS, and it got successful where it actually sort of worked against the company because the baby versions supplanted the grown-up versions in the eyes of many kids who grew up with the babies. So when I remember going to the 3D movie down in Disney World, I would hear a lot of people explain, oh, this is grown-up versions of what the Muppet Babies were. Yes, exactly.
Wasn't Jim the first to make baby versions?
Yes, so
of
he
characters
did
too?
start that before a pup called Scooby-Doo and
Water bottle
Flintstone
babies and microphone babies.
Yeah. And that was, sort of, there was a joke, and you could slap Jim Henson's blank babies on any of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, but I should mention Michael Frith. Michael Frith was the executive at Henson who really, pushed the Muppet Babies show, and it was very unique because it had the clips from other movies and things, which is one of the reasons why it's hard to get it seen on television now.
Although, to be fair, almost all that stuff is owned by Disney right now. So, again, go to Disney Plus, go
but
find
it was funny,
that
one
website, type in Muppet Babies.
They did it also because it was cheap. When they started doing Muppet Babies, it was cheap to get the clips. The Muppet Babies became successful, and all the clip licensing companies increased their prices. So one of my first jobs at Henson was trying to find clips to use in Muppet Babies that Henson owned. So if you look at the last few seasons of Muppet Babies, you'll see a bunch of clips out of Labyrinth and things that other licensed things that Henson already owned the rights to.
Let's get through these last two questions because we're running very short on time, but I don't want to lose either of you. So please, go ahead.
So I remember when Star Wars kind of came back with like the other ones. Forgive me, I'm not enough of a fan to actually know the numbers in the lineup. But it was not going to be a puppet Yoda. It was going to be the CGI. And I think a bunch of us had panicked like, oh no. And it wasn't, at least for those I know, as enjoyable as the puppet version of it. And even though CGI, you know, you can get more nuance with expression, etc. I'm just curious, does anyone have insight or thoughts as to why puppets will still capture our attention more as an audience, and we love that more than the nuance of
I think
CGI?
the Lucasfilm actually answered your question because they did go back to a puppet Yoda after that.
But any idea why that appeals maybe to us more as viewers than something?
It's a question puppeteers get often. You know, how do you live in a world that's a lot of CG? And my answer is, I think they're two very different mediums that work really well at very specific things. I think if you look at Jurassic Park as a great example, the first one, of beautiful shots of puppets and beautiful CG. And when used appropriately, I think they're both equally valid. But to your point, Yoda was a character, and it was a connection with Mark Hamill and Frank Oz. You know, that's hard to replicate if Mark Hamill's looking at a green tennis ball. You know?
Thank you.
Hi, I have some questions. Do you know if Muppets Tonight will come to Disney Plus, and whatever happened to Clifford and Rizzo, and with Sam and Friends, I think the show should have been called Kermit and Friends.
Well, it's interesting.
And also, I know with Sam and Friends with Kermit, he wasn't a frog. It wasn't. I think it was until Sesame Street was when he officially became a frog in other projects like that. And like, do you know if Muppets Tonight will appear on Disney Plus? And do you know if Clifford is gonna join the Muppet Gang again? And like and like Kevin Clash and all that, because I know he's now working for the Henson Company.
On Muppets Tonight, it's pretty much the same answer as Muppet Family Christmas. If people write to Disney, they do own that show. You know, with Muppets Tonight, as with Muppet Show, it's about music licensing. But if they could do, you know, 120 episodes of Muppet, or 118 episodes of the Muppet Show that they have on Disney Plus, they could certainly figure out music license for the 20-some-odd episodes of Muppets Tonight.
Yep. Go to the Disney Plus website. Type in Muppets Tonight.
I've done that.
Yeah, everyone in this room, go
Everybody do it twice.
Yes, I think we've all done that.
Great.
And the other question, it's really up to Disney to figure out what their next steps with Rizzo and Clifford are. And I don't know, you know, it's totally
Anything
their
could
call.
happen.
It depends on the music rights and all that.
That's a big part of it, and for audiences to, you know, to tell Disney that this is what they want, because they want to give us.
And keep watching the Muppet stuff on Disney Plus.
Yes, they are watching our numbers. There's so much great Muppet material out there, and some of it is on the unofficial side. So I hope that everyone goes out and finds all that great Muppet stuff, because it's just an endless well of
Keep looking for
amazing
Sam and Friends.
Yeah.
What's that?
Keep looking for Sam and
Yes,
Friends.
and keep looking for new Sam and Friends.
Check your closets.
Keep looking.
And everyone, the Sam and Friends book is now available at bearmanormedia.com and places where you can buy books. And also, please visit toughpigs.com. That's my website for Muppet fan stuff. Oh, thanks. Everyone, thank you so much for coming to our panel, and I hope you have a great rest of your con.